disguising. She's a little handful of trouble, a bundle of fun. Glad you could make it, so glad you could come. Little Miss, we're waiting for you. Ready, steady, how do you do?
Little Miss Tiny was extremely small. She was not very tall at all. She was so very tiny that she didn't even live in a house. Do you know where she lived? In a mouse hole, in the dining room of a farmhouse. She had made the mouse hole quite comfortable, really, and luckily there weren't any mice because Ginger, the big farm cat, had chased them all away. Now, the trouble was, because she was so tiny, nobody even knew she lived there. Nobody noticed her, not even the farmer and his wife. She didn't even get junk mail from supermarkets. So there she lived, all alone, and she was lonely and sad.
I wish I had someone to talk to.
One day she was feeling so lonely, she decided to be very brave and go for a walk.
Okay, Tiny, best foot forward.
Out of her mouse hole she came. She crept across the dining room and went through the crack in the door and into the hall. To little Miss Tiny, the hall looked as big as a football field.
Oh, my goodness.
And she scurried across it to the back door of the farmhouse. Luckily for her, the cat flap at the bottom of the door was open, and she squeezed herself through it and out onto the doorstep. It was all very exciting. There before her was the vast expanse of the farmyard, so she set out to explore it. As little Miss Tiny walked across the yard, she came upon a hole. Suddenly, out popped a worm.
Morning. See any birds around?
Oh, my goodness, it's a monster.
Little Miss Tiny was terrified. She ran across the farmyard to hide, and she came to a door with a gap at the bottom and ducked in underneath. There inside was someone snorting and breathing very heavily. It was a pig, a large pig. And if you're as small as little Miss Tiny is, a pig looks very large indeed. Miss Tiny looked at the pig, and the pig looked at Miss Tiny. The pig grunted and moved closer to inspect the little person who had entered the sty.
Oh, my goodness, mercy!
And Miss Tiny shot out of the pigsty as fast as her little legs could carry her, which wasn't very fast because her legs were so small. She stopped to catch her breath.
Oh, my goodness, I can't stop the knocking of my knees. Oh.
When she recovered her breath, she climbed up on a large stone to see if the pig had followed her. Fortunately, it hadn't.
Thank goodness for that.
But suddenly, the stone began to move.
Oh, no, for heaven's sakes, what's happening now?
Hey, you! Get off my back!
It was only a harmless old snail. Little Miss Tiny jumped down and ran across the farmyard. She ran around to the back of the pigsty before she stopped. She leaned against the wall and put her hands over her eyes. Suddenly, she heard a noise, a very close sort of noise, a sort of licking noise, which sounded an awful lot like broken windshield wipers, which scared her even more.
Oh, what's that?
She hardly dared to take her hands away from her eyes, but when she did, she wished she hadn't. What do you think it was? There, right in front of her, looking at her with green eyes, was Ginger. Not the Snaps, but the farm cat. Poor little Miss Tiny. Ginger grinned from ear to ear and showed Miss Tiny her sharp white teeth.
Help! Oh, somebody please help me!
Well, it looked like curtains for little Miss Tiny. She shouted at the top of her voice. The trouble was, the top of her voice was not very loud. Ginger grinned another grin. Every day, Mr. Strong went out to gather some eggs. He loved eggs, lots of them. That day, he was walking back across the farmyard when he heard a very tiny squeak. At first, he thought he had stepped on a cricket. But then there it was again. It was coming from around the corner. He looked around the corner and saw Ginger and little Miss Tiny.
Help, please help me.
So come on now, scram, little cat.
Mr. Strong gently picked up little Miss Tiny, very gently.
Hello, who are you?
I'm Miss Tiny.
You really are, aren't you? Well, if I was as tiny as you, I wouldn't go wandering around large farmyards.
But I'm so lonely, I wanted to find somebody to talk to.
I understand. Well, let's see if we can't find you some friends to talk to.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
And now, every day, Mr. Strong collects little Miss Tiny and takes her off to see her friends. 3 days ago, he took her to see Mr. Funny, who told her so many jokes she just couldn't stop laughing all day. 2 days ago, he took her to see Mr. Greedy. Mr. Greedy told her his special recipe for his favorite breakfast.
Toast, 2 slices, cornflakes, 1 whole box, milk, 1 bottle, sugar, 1 bowl, ham, 3 slices, eggs, 4, boiled of course, soft, 10 sausages, butter 1 pound, marmalade 1 pot, and a box of cupcakes.
But that's too much for tiny little me. I couldn't possibly eat all that.
Well, for you, divide by 100.
Yesterday, Mr. Strong took her to see Mr. Silly. And while they were there, Mr. Silly showed her how you stand on your head.
That's very silly.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And guess who she met today? Someone who's become a special little friend. Mr. Small.
I never thought I'd ever meet anybody smaller than myself.
Just you wait till I grow up.
Very good. Very good. Oh, that's really good. Very good.